Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Almassian. You definitely know that all countries spy on each other. Russia spies on the United States spies on Russia, Israel spies on its neighboring countries, the neighboring countries spy on Israel, China spies on the United States spies on China. Every single country spies on its neighbors or its surrounding or even further in order to advance its foreign policy and its economic interest. So there is nothing bizarre about that. Since the start of humanity, people were spying on their maybe neighboring clans, what the other village, other town are doing, how are they harvesting, how are they doing in their economic affairs, etc. So they can compete with each other, right? But in my opinion, there is no time in history that somebody spied on the other side, especially when it comes to governments and countries, and this side that is spying on the other side comes and blames the other side when the other side finds out that it's been spied on. And just before jumping into this video, a few weeks ago I was watching a documentary. I don't remember the name, but it's about spying and spies on Netflix, and it shows how the Soviet Union and the United States were spying on each other, and it's crazy. They were even putting technologies and spying technologies in the gifts that they were giving to each other, the diplomats, the ambassadors, the officials, etc. So all countries spy on each other. And why I'm saying this, because today and yesterday there is some media hype surrounding the issue of the United States spying or it's a spying jet which was flying over southern Chinese Sea, and it was intercepted by Chinese military warplane, and now the United States is blaming China, and this is it. So this is the video. This is captured by an American plane, and it is a spy plane, and it was flying over South China Sea on May 26, according to the Pentagon. And the Pentagon says that the Chinese side conducted some dangerous and unnecessary maneuvers just near the nose of the spy fighter jet or the spy jet of the United States. Let's take a look first of this video. So this is the Chinese warplane, and it's just flying very close to the American spy jet. So before I show you what the Pentagon said, I'm just going to show you another reportage made by the CNN, which is speaking about the importance of the South China Sea. And I think it's important for us first to understand why the United States is spying on China from the South China Sea, and why it is important for China, and why it is important for the other neighboring countries, for example, Indonesia and other countries. Let's take a look.
This small, sparsely populated islands and reefs are at the center of a heated international dispute over land and water rights involving China, the United States, and much of Southeast Asia. Nearly a third of the world's trade passes through here on ships, and valuable gas and oil deposits are believed to lie below these waters. Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, and Taiwan all have competing claims to territory, but China is the most ambitious and the most aggressive. As you can see, China claims almost all of the sea, citing a historic boundary it calls the 9-dash line. And over here,
So lots of traffic in the South China Sea between Vietnamese, Indonesian, Taiwanese, Chinese, and many other ships are competing for trade routes there. And let's remember what happened during after World War II, when the Soviet Union and the United States went against each other in a Cold War. And during the Cold War, there were the theories of the land power and the sea power, and the United States was a stronger sea power. And some of the theorists say because the United States was a stronger sea power and it had a stronger grip over the trade routes, the maritime trade routes. That's why the United States was able to defeat the Soviet Union in this long run or long-term competition and Cold War between each other. So now the Chinese and its neighboring countries, they know the importance of the maritime trade route. So they're competing over the South China Sea, and they are even establishing, as you see, fake or manufactured islands in order to have a stronger grip over these trade routes. And who is meddling in this? The United States. And the United States, of course, they have a lot of military bases surrounding China, in Indonesia, in Vietnam, and other countries, because they want to limit the access of China to the international maritime trade routes, right? This is the main purpose why the United States is there, because they want to limit the access of China to the international trade routes and also try to suppress the Chinese international trade power. Although the United States is the biggest partner of China, but still, because China is using its economic power and translating it into an economic and military power, so China can now project its power in different geopolitical conflicts, such as in Ukraine, in the Middle East, between Iran and Saudi Arabia, in Syria, and in different places. So China is using basically its economic powerhouse as a mean to meddle in different geopolitical issues and strike deals between them, or even influence the outcome of any conflict. So what happened now after this almost a crash between so this is the Pentagon narrative. Chinese fighter acted unnecessarily aggressive near US plane over South China Sea, officials say. The pilot of a Chinese fighter jet carried out an unnecessary aggressive maneuver last week while approaching a US Air Force plane over the South China Sea, American officials said Tuesday, as tensions rise over China's territorial claims in East Asia. The pilot of the G-16 Chinese fighter jet flew directly in front of the nose of an American RC-135 aircraft. They don't even say it's a spy aircraft, but it is, which is designed for reconnaissance, according to a statement from the US Indo-Pacific Command, which also released video of the incident. The US said its plane was conducting safe and routine operations as it moved through international airspace in the South China Sea. Yeah, so they were conducting routine operation of spying on China there. There is no other explanation. Why would there be a reconnaissance plane belonging to the United States and flying on the borders with China, honestly? And so what's the reason for that? Even if it's routine, even if it's safe, they're spying on China. They're spying on Chinese military, probably drills or any sorts of capabilities that China has. So this is targeted reconnaissance operation against a rival of the United States. And China now reacted, and now China is being seen by the mainstream media as the aggressor. Anyways, China has not publicly addressed the incident, which took place Friday, but it has long claimed sovereignty over the South China Sea, leading to disputes with the likes of the Philippines, Vietnam, and Indonesia. Actually, this article was a few hours ago, and the Chinese side made a comment just an hour ago, I think, or two. China urges US to stop provocative moves in South China Sea. China said on Wednesday that a US RC-135 surveillance aircraft deliberately broke into a Chinese military training area in the South China Sea on May 26 to carry out reconnaissance and interference. China had sent aircraft to track and monitor the US jet in accordance with laws and regulations, said Zhuang Nandong, spokesperson for the Southern Theater Command of the Chinese People's Liberation Army, on Wednesday. The Chinese army is always on high alert and will resolutely defend China's national sovereignty and security, as well as peace and stability in the South China Sea, the spokesperson added. To be honest, I was checking for some commentaries, what experts say in this regard, and I found this, to be honest, very accurate and funny at the same time from this Global Times article. And there is a Chinese expert. He says the US is like a thief crying, quote, "Stop thief." If someone keeps wandering around on your doorsteps and taking photos all the time with obvious malicious intentions, it is not your fault if you take them, go away, the expert says. And I completely agree with this assessment. Now, some people may say, why would China be triggered? And maybe the United States has maybe good intentions, right? It's not spying on China. But here it is. This is a report. I will show you 1 minute of it from the 60 Minutes Australia program. And they are fantasizing and almost, ejaculating over the strength and the might of the US Army that is preparing most probably for war against China near the Chinese borders. And they have a strong military bases surrounding China in different countries, neighboring countries of China, but also it has a strong fleet there. And they have lots of fighter jets. So why the United States is there? So, and look, how do they portray the American army there? It looks like from an American Hollywood movie. And it reminds me when Trump was bombing Syria and all this, even CNN journalists who hate Trump with passion, they were like almost fantasizing over the beauty of the American weapons and American rockets and missiles falling over the heads of the people in Syria. And now you watch this reportage from an Australian TV channel and you're like, what the fuck, man? It's like they're truly, truly fantasizing over the American Army's might, capabilities in the South China Sea near the Chinese borders. Take a look.
Showing off.
Quite simply, yes, we're ready.
In the world's most dangerous hotspot.
Yeah, we're ready.
And China is not happy about it.
On 60 Minutes.
We're seeing the biggest military build-up in the world since the end of the Second World War.
It's a massive display of force.
In some of the most stressful and dangerous situations.
Using the most advanced weapons.
War is catastrophic. If it comes, we're going to do our part.
If we maintain status quo, that there's only one China, Taiwan is part of China, I'm sure there will be peace.
Sounds like a threat.
Plus,
which state actor is the key threat to democracy?
Chinese Communist Party.
What the Five Eyes see.
It's a massive effort from the Chinese state. Chinese Communist Party controls it all.
The intelligence chief's warning.
Pure espionage.
About a new invisible war.
Making sure we protect our way of life.
And
so this is it. It truly irritates me to see journalists are on a military fleet trying to make a propaganda reportage about the military might of the United States. This is not fun. You know, if there is war, God forbid, between China and the United States, this is going to be very, very ugly and very bloody. And forget about what's happening in Ukraine. This is, if there is any sort of conflict between China and the United States, whether it's proxy or direct, what's happening in Ukraine is going to be just a playground. It's going to be like a video game or something compared to what happens with China. That's a serious case, bro. And these journalists are like pushing the war by giving the impression that the US Army is invisible, it's undefeatable, it's very strong and the Chinese side cannot defeat. And they say this is the biggest military build-up since World War II on the borders with China. And then when there is a reconnaissance. Boy, I'm like always making mistakes with this. Reconnaissance jet flying near the borders with China. You know why? What's the purpose for that? They're collecting information about the Chinese military. And this is going to be used against China at any, God forbidden, if there is any war between the both sides. But what also bothers me, when we watch this reportage from this Australian TV, I don't like to be treated like a stupid person. Respect my brain, respect my intelligence. Don't treat your audience like they are dumps and they're dumb asses and they don't understand anything. Don't treat them like that because you're doing that, people are coming to alternative media outlets and they're trying to follow people on Twitter and YouTube, etc. Treat them with respect. Respect their intelligence. Don't come and say that China is a threat to democracy. It's like as if there is a democracy in the United States from the first place. Two, as if the core of the conflict between these two sides is about democracy or communism. It's about geopolitics, it's about economy, it's about trade routes, it's about a lot of things, but democracy or rule of law or governance or transparency and all this stuff, these are for stupid people. You can sell these illusions and arguments to only stupid people. You cannot convince anyone with two functioning brain cells that the United States is encircling China with tens of military bases and conducting spying operations on a daily basis to protect democracy or to protect the way of life. Also has been mentioned in Taiwan somehow. It's crazy. I mean, it makes me really disgusted to see that they're still repeating. If it was 2003, still during the times of Saddam Hussein, and the people were fooled about it, I would say okay. But 20 years later, they're still repeating the same narrative and the same lies. I found an actually funny video. I think it's a parody or comedy. It's a sketch from a movie. And they depict this situation between China and the United States in the South China Sea. Take a look.
I'll come straight to the point. This white paper is recommending we spend close to $400 billion over the forward estimates. Now, at some point, the PM is going to be asked a very simple question. In order to protect us from which enemy?
It's so hard to say.
400 billion, pick one.
A regional player.
Specifically, Colonel?
An Indo-Pacific regional player.
More specifically?
Indo-Asia Pacific.
That's broader. Who are you leaving out? Europe? Yeah, I sort of need a country.
Or an unaligned player.
No, a country.
One that might threaten us. Just one.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to raise tensions.
Where?
In this room.
You know what? I'll name one and you just nod. China.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. And what exactly are we protecting?
Strategic interests.
Specifically, Colonel?
Indo-Pacific strategic
Again,
interests.
Brigadier, really specifically.
Indo-Asia Pacific strategic
You know what?
interests.
I'll say it and then you nod. Our trade routes.
Trade routes. Thank you.
Yeah. And who is our number one trading partner?
Shall we use an odd system?
Sure. China? Yeah. So under this scenario, we're spending close to $30 billion a year to protect our trade with China from China. And that doesn't strike anyone at this table as odd.
This was very funny. I thought you would also laugh if you watch this video. I wanted to share it with you. This is about trade routes, economics, geopolitics, interests, not democracy, way of life. Oh, they hate our freedoms. Nobody hates your freedoms, bro. You have freedoms in your own country. Why would you hate you for what you're doing in your own country? That's BS. You know that. It's about trade routes. Thank you very much. In 1 minute, we understood what's happening in the South China Sea. But this is not the only thing I wanted to share with you. Just last article, guys, before I end up this video. Another maritime issue popped up today, which I think is very important. The United Arab Emirates reveals it withdrew from US-led maritime coalition months ago. The UAE revealed on 31st May that it withdrew its forces from the US-led combined maritime forces 2 months ago after evaluating its security agreements. The combined maritime forces is a 34-nation task force headquartered in Bahrain, the home of the US Navy's Fifth Fleet. Abu Dhabi also denied a Tuesday report by the Wall Street Journal that claimed the country was frustrated over Washington's weak response to the recent seizure of oil tankers by the Iranian army, calling the reporting a mischaracterization of talks with US officials. Despite Abu Dhabi's denials of the Wall Street Journal report, the UAE has been pushing back against US diktats over the past year after Washington failed to come to the Gulf nation's aid following Yemeni missile and drone hit the Emirati capital, killing 3 people. The UAE officials were also shocked during a meeting with the military attaché at the US Embassy after the second Yemeni strike within days, when instead of offering military assistance, the US official handed his Emirati counterparts a bill for refueling their jets. I am very happy that the Saudis and the Emiratis are learning, finally, and waking up to the fact that the United States pushed them into war with Yemen, or in Yemen, against some factions in Yemen, let's say, because they wanted to sell weapons to Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and not to achieve victory by the Saudis and the Emiratis in the Yemeni soil. The American goal is to prolong the war and not to end the war. Now they're waking up to this, because when the Yemenis retaliated and they struck the Aramco oil fields and also in Abu Dhabi, the allies of the United States in Riyadh and Abu Dhabi, they were expecting more military assistance, and instead the Americans were like treating them like jackasses, and they were sending them bills to refuel their fighter jets. So I'm very happy that the Saudis and the Emiratis aren't blindly following the dictates of the United States, and they are now respecting themselves way more by saying no to the US. And if one day the Russians or the Chinese treat these countries similarly, I would expect from the Saudis, I would expect from the Emiratis, I would expect from the Syrians to show self-respect and say no if something is against their own national security or their strategic interests. I said if. Up until this moment, the Chinese and the Russian approach in the Middle East is different. And I'm reading some of the comments in some of the comments on Twitter and on YouTube, my account. There are so many people who dislike China. And I have nothing against you guys for having an opinion against China. And I'm not pro-China, I'm not pro-Russia. I'm saying there is a different approach by these countries in the Middle East, and we can see that. And I can give you examples from Syria. The Russian interests in Syria at some times, they were different from Damascus' interests, but they didn't dictate on Damascus to do something. Although Russia has a very strong influence over Damascus, but they don't do that. They send suggestions, recommendations, and Damascus discusses it with its, of course, circles, elites, and they take their own decisions. This is self-respect. You have to say no even to your allies if your interests do not match the interests of your allies. And I expect similar policies from the Saudis and the Emiratis, and I'm happy to see that they are at least now standing in the middle and not like pushing all the way on the American side. So what do you think, guys, about the American reconnaissance operations near the Chinese borders? Do you think they're doing it with a goodwill? Do you think they are spying on China and preparing for war against China? Why are they doing it? Is it only for trade route, or they're protecting democracy, human rights, and values there? Let me know your opinions in the comments below. I've been your host, Almassian of Syriana Analysis. Guys, if you're new, please subscribe, help the growth of my channel. And if you want to support my independent commentary work like this, please become a patron. That's very important for me. The link in the description below. And see you next time.